Hey there guys, today I'm going to show you how I installed this culvert cistern to collect rainwater off my shop and further my total rainwater harvesting capacity. It's not too complex of a job, but it is a bit of hard work. I actually installed it probably about a month ago, but I had to let the concrete cure before I could do the final sealing on the inside of the tank. So let me show you the steps I took to install it, and then I will talk about that rinky-dinky little DIY gutter system I made up.
The first thing we're going to look at is the formwork. This is really the most important part of any culvert cistern install. The forms I've built for this are approximately 1 foot larger than the total diameter of the culvert, so that you have at least 6 inches of concrete all the way around. I then have a rebar grid that's placed about halfway up in the forms, and this is actually going to be what the culvert sets on. Additionally, this grid of remesh and rebar will also give the concrete tensile strength, which it doesn't naturally have. It has a lot of compressive strength, but it just needs something to hold it together for when cracks eventually do form. The next thing you'll notice is that I have all of my plumbing work preset within the rebar grid. These don't have to be placed exactly, but essentially your hose spigot will need to be somewhere on the edge of the slab, on the outside of the culvert wall, and the inlet will just need to be somewhere inside at a height of where you want your water to be able to drain to. And this last pipe is the overflow for the cistern. It's an 1.5 inch pipe, but I would probably recommend using a 2-inch pipe. I just happen to have this 1.5 inch on hand. Anyway, it will come up in the center of the culvert and allow water to overflow outside the cistern through the middle of the slab. Now onto the concrete pour. Obviously I'm using a truck for this slab because I was doing several other pours at the same time, but most often I've always mixed this just with individual bags in a mixer and pushing it into the forms with a wheelbarrow. Once the mix is in and worked in to all the sides really well, you will use a board to screed the top. And then once that's done, you'll get a general float. Just make sure everything is nice and smooth before you get ready to dip your culvert in. Now luckily my neighbor Al let me use his tractor to have this culvert all set up so we could just pull forward and set it in. But it's important to know that this can easily be set by hand as well with some ratchet straps and some 2x4s. I'll post a link to the video I did with my buddy Jason where we did just that. Took 4 guys to move it in and is just as precise, if not easier, to get everything dialed in than using a tractor like this. After making sure everything was centered, I then lowered the culvert into the mix. At this point, it should be resting completely on the rebar grid that I placed in the forms earlier, and this is the big reason why it's so important to make sure that grid work is very level, because it will help you in getting this plumb. We rock it back and forth just a little bit to make sure it's completely settled in, and check plumb on all sides just in case the culvert is a little out of round, which can be common if they're not stored or transported properly. And the last step is to finish the outsides of the slab with an edger and bring it to a trowel finish. This usually takes about 2 hours of time, and luckily I've had my friends Bryce and Adam to help me with this because they do much better work, just a lot more experienced and skilled in the craft of concrete. After that was done, I took off the forms a couple of days later and then just patched any of the void areas that you might notice a little bit with a Portland cement mix.
So at this point, the culvert has cured in the slab for about 3 weeks, and I'm just coating all of the interior seams and the floor, as well as where the pipes penetrate through the slab, in this liquid rubber. It's called Blue Max, and it's the only potable formula that I found for like cisterns and potable water. And I'm going to let this cure for a couple days, and then I'll mount the gutters. Okay, so now you've seen the culvert all installed, and now let's talk about this little rinky-dinky gutter piping system I've got set up. The gutters are basically just standard 4-inch gutters, but I am running them to 2-inch PVC lines, and I went with 2-inch basically for no other reason other than cost. I was just thinking this roof is quite a bit smaller, and I was thinking 2-inch should be able to handle the amount of runoff, but I guess if it's undersized, I will just end up moving it to 3-inch. I did have some problems with the fact that my front awning was just barely, only about 3.5 to 4 inches higher than the culvert, which is plenty for piping the system, but I did have to take special care to make sure the run would flow downhill the entire way. Obviously the back side and the front side meet in the middle right there by the shop, and then they run over to the culvert, and then in the culvert. Okay, another question I'm sure I'll probably get, am I going to be painting these PVC pipes or doing something to dress them up? Yeah, I know they don't really blend in with the shop. I probably will end up painting them, but I will probably ultimately just take them down during our 8 months of pretty predictably dry weather. I just installed them with these little L brackets, and they're pretty much just friction fit together, so I can just pop them out like that. I could store them underneath the container or somewhere else out of the sunlight and just install them for our couple really rainy times of year. So how does this thing overflow? Well, it doesn't overflow from the sides. It overflows from the interior of the tank. I don't know if you remember early on when I showed the PVC pipe that comes up right in the center of the tank. That is actually the PVC overflow pipe, and it is basically going up to within about 2 inches of the top level of the tank, so that all the water overflows inside the tank and out from the bottom of the slab, so that no water goes around the slab and ends up eroding soil out from the culvert. And then from there I can just direct it into a barrel or another tank or into some swales or whatever I end up deciding to do. Okay, so that's pretty much it. As you can see, this is not something that's super complex to install, but it is a bit time sensitive and labor intensive, and you will need a few friends to help you do a project like this. But I think for the efforts involved, it ends up in a pretty darn unique looking water storage container. I've had one on the front side of my house for about 7 years, and you've probably seen that in several videos, and I obviously really like them. I will include some links of some other videos I've done and an article I've done on how to install these. I did a video with my buddy Jason on installing one, and we actually moved the culvert into the mix, not with a tractor or any mechanical device, but we just did it with 2x4s and 4 strong guys or gals you could use, as well as I have an overview of installing the one on the front side of my property, and I will post a link to an article I wrote for Backwoods Home about 4 years ago on how to install one of these. So with those resources, I don't think you should have any problems installing one of these. But for those of you who want a very detailed step-by-step guide on how to install one of these cisterns, I recently did a video course with Derek from DIY Homestead Projects that takes you through every single step of installing one of these, with bad jokes included, compliments of me, but it takes you start to finish from the forms, pretty much every screw going in, and it's about an hour and a half long, and it will take you through every single step of the process. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Like I said, every resource that you absolutely need to be successful in installing one of these is available for free. But if you do want that more thorough, detailed step-by-step guide, check for the link down below. And as always, guys, I always appreciate you watching. I appreciate any thumbs ups you give, subscriptions or anything like that. And feel free to check me out on Instagram. That seems to be the social media other than YouTube that I am most consistent with. And you'll probably see a bunch of clips of the welding table project, which is right over there. So as always, I will see you guys next time.